This is Father Gregory Pine.
And I'm Father Joseph Anthony Kress.
And welcome to Godsplaining. Thanks to all those who support us. If you enjoy the show, please consider making a monthly donation on Patreon. Be sure to like and subscribe to Godsplaining wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, for this episode of Guestsplaining, we are very delighted to be joined by Emily Wilson Hussem. So thanks so much for joining us on Godsplaining.
Thanks for having me all the way out here from California. We're all over the world here, and it's such a delight to be together.
So many time zones at play right now. We're bouncing all over the place, but it's good.
It is true, and it is also complicated by the fact that the United States and Europe, what's the word for this? They undergo daylight savings time at different times. So you guys have been daylight savings now for a bit, while I have not yet begun to save the daylight or spring forward or whatever one does. But so just know that, okay?
Oh gosh. When does yours start?
Mine starts in a week. It starts at the time of recording. It starts in 6 days. For those who are hearing this in real time, it starts on March 26th. So yeah, I schedule all my appointments with a 6-hour change. And then for 2 weeks, I just apologize to everyone under the sun because I am bad at planning.
Oh my goodness.
It's a great gift. It's a great gift in my life and the life of all those who suffer. Yeah. Okay. So many of our listeners will know you from books that you have written, from ministries that you have launched or, are currently conducting, or from talks, that they've heard. So for those who don't know you, would you say a word of introduction, who you are, where you're from, what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Emily Wilson Hussem. I was raised in Los Angeles, California. I made YouTube videos not before YouTube videos were big, but kind of before YouTube videos were big, before everybody had a YouTube channel. Certainly not everybody,
or a video podcast, maybe.
Yes.
Before people had video podcasts,
Exactly. Just like this one that we're on. So I started making YouTube videos and speaking all over America and the world. That's how I met my husband. My husband is Dutch. I was speaking at a conference over there, praise be to God. And I've written 6 books. Some of them are for adult women, some are for teen girls, some are for children. And I just love the Lord, and I love serving the Lord. And I love going all over the world and meeting people who love serving the Lord too. It's just such a great joy to do ministry.
Boom. Okay. Other sweet time-bound detail that will no longer apply once this episode airs. I was just in the Netherlands this past weekend, kicking it with the Dominican Sisters of St. Cecilia, who have a mission in Sittard in Limburg. And I gave some talks / a retreat for their students at the University of Maastricht. So I love the Netherlands. Not as much as you do, because I haven't yet married it. Not that your husband is the Netherlands, but you see where I'm
That's right. You are where we are familiar with the sisters. I know some of those sisters that live there, and my husband is exactly from where you were. He's from Limburg. He has family in Maastricht, all in the south there. So you were at my husband's, homeland.
This is incredible.
I love that.
Yeah, as do I. Okay, so in this episode, apropos of your Dutch husband, we're going to talk about marriage preparation. So presumably your marriage preparation entailed learning Dutch, and his, no, just kidding. But maybe. So we're looking at the lay of the land, which probably falls somewhere on the spectrum between, let's see, post-apocalyptic nightmare and, table of plenty, with lots of variation depending on time and place and circumstance. So what do you see when you look at the landscape of marriage preparation in the church? What are some strengths? What are some weaknesses? And where do we start the conversation?
It's a great question. Obviously, it's a huge topic of conversation. That's why I'm excited to be talking about it today. Most of what I see is a barren disaster. And this comes from people like, how do you know this? I've been working with women of all different ages for the last 12 years, walking more specifically for women in their 20s and 30s and 40s for the last 8 years. And so I hear a lot of different experiences constantly about what their marriage preparation experiences are like. And many of them, it is one weekend. They have to do an engaged encounter. They're like, well, 3 days, you go to all your talks and you guys are ready to go. And then they send them down the aisle and hope for the best. There are, I think, people which I have a big heart for, starting a marriage prep revolution. There are lots of wonderful ministries that are seeing the need for this, that are popping up. I hear of like specific parishes here and there where I'll talk to a young woman. She's like, our marriage prep was unbelievable. We had a mentor couple. We had very many nights that we had to attend that were actually fruitful and beneficial. And the conversations were amazing. But for me, in my experience of talking and walking with women, that's the exception. And the rule is women like saying, I keep calling the parish and I'm trying to do the marriage prep and like nobody's returning my calls and I don't know what to do. And that's why I think there's a lot of different reasons I think we need a marriage prep revolution, but I would vote mostly for barren disaster. I don't know, Father Joseph Anthony, what you might see out in the horizon. But that's my experience with women, walking with them along this way.
I wish you really could speak your own feelings, like speak the true feelings there and not hold back at all, because you just straight up called it out, like out of the gate. And I love that because I agree with you. Like, I think it's a total dumpster fire floating down the river right now. And this marriage prep revolution is deeply needed. We've had many discussions about this, and I have so much I want to like cover and ask, but I think one of the things that we see a lot is we're starting this kind of major transition, I think, in the church. It has begun, but like we're nowhere near completing it, away from kind of event-based preparations when we're talking about sacramental prep. So preparing for this one random hour on a random Saturday in a random month, but to actually prepare for more of the whole sacrament in a relational style. So making that transition away from kind of event-based preparations into some kind of relational based sacramental prep, what do you see is affecting that transition to make sure that there's a full preparation for the totality of the sacrament and not just preparing for this? It's not a wedding prep, like a wedding planning session, but you're actually preparing for the sacrament of marriage, which is decades long in that sense.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are just seeing, obviously, the divorce rates, even in the Catholic Church. And me talking to women who are divorced, who share their stories with me to say, like, there was so much that was missed. Like, we were not, prepared in the way that now I see that we should have been, because it was one weekend, because nobody really dug into us about these problems that were really apparent, but we were so busy picking out cheese and chairs and flowers and color schemes that like there was nobody who really got into the nitty gritty with us there, right? We did our test, like there's many different tests, as to do. We did our test and our score was fine. And they're like, oh, like, you're fine. And these women who say like, I wish it had been done differently. I feel like a lot of those testimonies are really powerful in us looking at like, hey, like we can do better in the grand scope of this for couples, for people, to prepare them all, to help them discern well. Discernment in engagement is a huge part of the marriage prep process that I feel like is being lost. It's like, okay, let's prepare for marriage, but also how do we help prepare couples for marriage, but also help them discern if marriage is even the right thing all at the same time. You cannot do that in a 3-day weekend. You cannot do that in like 1 hour a month, when you go to this class together. It's just not possible,
Okay, so thinking of those tests or those inventories, which you just alluded to, I'm thinking especially of the focus inventory. They focus a lot on, so communication, like problem solving, family of origin issues, finances, intimacy and its expression, which are great. So we're talking about like the physical level, the emotional level, the psychological level often enough, and then the way that involves each other interpersonally. If you were to establish a hierarchy, all right, so spoilers, I'm thinking especially of the sacramental vision, this idea that like, marriage is give, and specifically give grace. And if you don't tap into the sacramental reality, you're going to run out. So when you kind of organize in terms of importance, what are the things that you're going to lead with, or what are the things that you want to stress just like right out the gate when it comes to marriage preparation?
I would say that giving, that sacrificial piece is really important, because I think that a lot of people like this whole and our marriage prep and the way couples are prepared are so affected by our culture, which says it's all about the
Yep.
wedding, it's all about this day, right? That nothing, marriage is not about sacrifice. Marriage is about how you feel, and if you're not feeling it, like, just leave. So this cultural, like, this messaging for couples that marriage is not sacrifice is causing a lot of harm for so many couples. This, like, looking at a person's ability to sacrifice within marriage prep, to look at moments over dating where, like, sacrifice was required of this person. Did they resist it? Did they give joyfully to that? I think communication is also really important, because I think there are a lot of different roadblocks in communication, a lot of wounds, obviously, we bring into any vocation that we might enter into, that need to be looked at and communicated about. I meet so many couples who say, well, I didn't think that we had to tell each other everything before we got married. It's like, you need to talk about everything, like everything. The transparency and vulnerability that marriage requires is astonishing. When you're in the middle of it, you are like, oh my gosh, the vulnerability. If you want your marriage to thrive, if you want this sacrament to be a thriving thing, the communication has to be so open. The degree to which you have to share with one another the deepest places of your hearts is key. And so I think sacrifice and communication are really important. Many people would also say like that family piece is also very important, because the way that you were raised, if you don't dive into those places as an individual and go through that as yourself, and then together through things like the focus test that can really help you see if you're on the same page, very, very vital to the health of a marriage.
When you are working with couples, and when we actually move to those like marriage prep moments and sessions and actually enter into marriage prep with a couple, it's always after the engagement, and rightly so. I'm not going to start marriage prep with somebody if they're not engaged yet. But that engagement period can be a very difficult time for a couple, because it's a temporary period, but nobody really has a clear identity of kind of the purpose in what should be expected of, like, how do we want to grow during this period? What should we be aiming for maturity and growth during the engagement period? I think there's clear identifiable markers with the dating period of like where this is tending towards, and the expectations and the goals for it. And there's clear identifiable markers for marriage of what this is tending towards. But it seems like the engagement period is like a holding pattern to just kind of get through it. So when you work with couples, like, how do you present it, or how do you kind of set that up and like, okay, this is your expectation, this is your goal for the engagement period for that couple? Because it can be so difficult for the couple, because there's a level of commitment, but there's no real transition or change of life. So how do you help couples to say like, okay, these should be our expectations and goals for growing?
It is so challenging. It's like the weirdest time that you just want to go faster. Like I said, you have to prepare for marriage while also planning a wedding. If you're having a wedding, some couples have a wedding with 25 people. Some couples have a wedding with 300 people. And you have to know, like, nobody like sits you down, right, and says, okay, this is how you manage all of this. But I think just seeing it as a time for discernment is really important. And I think throughout that time, just and most of what I hear from couples, it's just very most of it is challenging, because you want that day to come where you can join your lives together, and you are waiting for that day. But it's this active waiting of growing while you're waiting, and learning to love one another better while you're waiting. My dream, which I shared about in my talk at Seek, and I share about with a lot of different couples. And Father Joseph Anthony, you know about this. I want to start a marriage and family life come and see program that you can come and do while you're engaged for family life. obviously the Lord, he has a different plan for every married couple. Some do not have children, some have many children. Everybody's path looks totally different, but I want to have like little casitas in, our backyard where couples, a man and a woman, they can like stay in different ones and they can be a part of our life. And as they discern and as they grow together, they can come into these places where they can see the other's strengths and maybe the other's weaknesses and see like areas where they can grow together. I want people to come and stay for a week or 2 weeks. And I joke about it, but it's so true, because I think a lot of women I also talked to, they said like during engagement, I would have loved to have more like hands-on family life experience, because some of my friends, they get married, they have a honeymoon baby, and 9 months in, they're like, oh my gosh, what's happening right now? They came from a family where they weren't around a lot of small children. And during that engagement time, they see like, oh, I could have grown in this way during that time. Even though it is crazy with the wedding planning and the marriage prep, but like, come into my house, come into my life. I want to start that so that, you can help me with the kids all during the day. I have sons who are 4 and 2, and to really see, I would have loved that. I got married when I was 26. And during that engagement time when I was 25, to come like spend time with a young mom like me and see what she does, like see what it actually looks like, the life that I'm entering into. Because when you're a Dominican friar, you spend a lot of time like living the life of a Dominican, you see what is the reality of what I am discerning. Where can I grow as I move toward this vocation, to these vows? Come to my house, like when I have a baby, right? I tell girls, come to my house when I have a baby, and I'll wake you up all night. When the baby gets up, I will wake you up too, and you will come with me, and I will feed the baby, and we can be up together, and you can see like this life, and you can like have real preparation for it. Is a way that I would have loved to grow myself when I was engaged, to come into something like that, to have that hands-on, like take the veil away from like happy family photos by the beach, right? We see Instagram photos of like, look at our happy family, leading up to this Christmas card. Come and see the messy reality of the whole entire thing, and know what you're really discerning, and allow that to help you grow through that time too. And then at the end of the day, I would love to put the babies down, and then that couple can just ask us anything they really want to know. Because I think marriage prep, like mentor couples, are a huge part of a lot of the marriage prep revolution that I'm seeing. And I know Father Joseph Anthony, you have some of those at your parish as well.
Yep.
Having these mentor couples to really show you and tell you and bring you into the experience of marriage can be really eye-opening, because many people's one experience was their parents' marriage. Whether that was a good one, whether that was a bad one, a lot of people have that one like firsthand experience. And I think that can be limiting in what we see about what marriage actually is. So Father Joseph Anthony, what does the mentor couple like program at your marriage prep at your parish kind of look like?
Yeah, we have a wedding coordinator. Her name's Jillian, and she's just taken this ministry on with both arms and has just like embraced it and run wild with it. And so she's, over the last year, she has invited, I think, around a dozen mentor couples of the parish, or a dozen couples of the parish, to become mentor couples. And then they have a program, and I forget right now the program that they use. They themselves have gone on a retreat and invested in that. And then they take the marriage prep or the engaged couple through, I think, 6 or 7 different meetings. And they invite them into their home, they share a dinner, they share a meal with them, and then kind of go through a number of these different kind of modules or chapters. But it's about allowing this engaged couple to share and see the wisdom of the life and the sacrament lived out over decades, and the wisdom from that. And that's also coupled with meetings with a priest. So I'm still meeting with them, once a month for 6 months. So they're basically having every other week a contact point in some kind of preparation with that. I approach the sacramental side to make sure that they have an understanding of what the sacrament and the graces entail for that. And then they get a very experiential side with the marriage couples. So that way we're getting both a real lived experience of the sacrament, while still a deep introduction into the sacramental realities that they are preparing for. So that's how we're doing it right now. We've just started this over the last year, so a lot of it's kind of trial, but it's going really, really well. And it helps when you have somebody like a marriage coordinator in the parish who is really devoted to this and pouring themselves into it as well.
I have two thoughts. The first is that, Emily, when you start picking up speed, like when you really get cooking, I think you might actually speak faster than I do, um, which is awesome.
Yes.
So thank you. Um, we recorded an episode with Father Josh Johnson, and after
Yes,
a
I was gonna
certain
say that.
point, I was like, "You, my friend, are a monster."
uh,
So I consider it one of my goals in life to make podcasts that I record like resistant to 2 times speed. So it seems that you pertain to the same family of 2 times speed defiers. So
I gotta
respect.
get all when you have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and like things just
oh
go at like
yeah.
a real quick pace. You gotta just keep it moving. So that might be
I'm
why.
with
Who
you.
knows?
I'm with you.
Let's go. Let's go.
Okay. Second thing, my question is about troubleshooting. It seems like in the 21st century, people have difficulty managing conflict. For a variety of reasons. I think one, we're not really good at discourse, period, because we've kind of given up on reason. We're like, what if instead of reason, I did like irony or unmasking or protest or I just cried? It's like, okay, you can do that. It's just not,
Whoa.
never mind. So there's that for one. But then also, a lot of people are cohabiting and they find it difficult to manage their conflict because they think he will abandon me or I will have to pay, twice as much rent. So if you were to lay out some principles for good troubleshooting, conflict managing, like for growing together as a couple, even when things are tough and you don't see eye to eye, what might some of those be?
Yeah, I have my husband and I did a whole YouTube video on this about how
Let's go.
we've learned how to argue well over the years, which is true. What you say, we have not seen, most of us
Mm.
who enter into marriage have not seen people argue well, and like
Yep.
be most of my friends who they're home, they say it was just yelling and it was just slamming doors or whatever it is, like or shutting down, right? Learning how to, especially in conflict, like self-awareness is so important in any vocation, right? Of course, but in marriage, to really learn like what is going on inside of me. Why am I upset about this? Why am I angry about this? To really be able to take an inventory of what's going on in my heart and in my mind as a woman, right, married to a man who doesn't, we struggle to understand each other and our masculinity and femininity sometimes, which is where sacramental grace comes in the best way. But to really look at, before I say anything, before I do anything, whatever it is, to bring it to the Lord, and to look inside myself about what is going on with me. And then learning how, it's a process. Marriage, as we all know, is a process,
Mhm.
just that you get better at over time. But learning how to present myself in a clear way, in a way that's not, I try to do it in a way that's not overly emotional, to give myself time. I'm a person who likes to take time to process, right? When it comes to conflict and when it comes to things like that, to take time to process and then to be able to speak whatever is on my heart and in my mind. And then humility. Humility is something that is just so important in conflict, to humble myself, to listen, right? To not always say, oh, I'm right about this, that, or whatever, but to really invite the Lord into my life and try to strive for the virtue of humility before approaching any conflict is so important. In confession many years ago, when I was in the Netherlands, one of the priests, he said 2 things about marriage. He said 2 words: humility and perseverance. And those 2 things coupled together within conflict in marriage, and troubleshooting the day-to-day things that might come up, the misunderstandings, the miscommunications, humility and perseverance are so important. And then one thing that is so helpful when it comes to conflict is that for us, we made a vow in front of everybody, in front of our friends and family, in a covenant with the Lord forever. There is not a way out, there's only a way through for us. So when we're looking at conflict, we're a team that we're going to find a way through together, and we will be better for that. We will have grown from that. And that's what all learning about conflict over the time of our marriage has been, is like growth through the love that we share, but also the misunderstandings and the miscommunications, and the humility that's required of saying, I'm sorry, you were right, I forgive you, whatever it is, and becoming more quick to do that rather than like digging in our heels and like letting conflict go on forever. One of the things that we try to do is move past conflict as quickly as possible, as fast as we can with our children. Sometimes things have to be tabled until later on in the day where we can actually talk about things. But I think that is like managing conflict is something that's so important in marriage prep, because there are a lot of conflicts that come up during engagement. You're having arguments about this or that or whatever, and the fiance is like, all you care about is the cupcakes, and I'm like, like trying to prepare to be a good father and husband or whatever it is, and like I just feel like you're totally neglecting me. And so these points of communication can really be worked through in marriage prep, I think, in a lot better ways. And like Father Joseph Anthony's parish, like you're really checking in with these couples. But I just think about these couples who say, I called the parish so many times and we had this 3-day. Who has helped them look at the way they communicate in conflict? Who has really dived in with them to say, like, how do you speak to each other? Do you call each other names? Like, does one of you shut down? Does one of you need more time to process? Helping a couple actively look at their own hearts and minds and lives and the ways that they saw conflict worked through over time is so important. And it's being hugely missed in so many couples' relationships before they actually, enter into the sacrament and go from there.
Okay, so I have like 15 thoughts, but I want to try to distill them down to 2. Bear with me.
15 is fine.
I think, one of my absolute favorite marketing campaigns is from Under Armour. And there's a 30-second commercial where it's just like training montage after training montage, people like flipping like heavy ropes and like bench pressing and running up and down stairs in the middle of the night. And then at the very end, it just says, the only way is through. And that's like black screen with that title, that text up there. I'm like, yeah, that's 1,000% it. Like there's so much about our life is like, yeah, the only way is through it. And you just got to keep going. So, shout out Under Armour and marriage. Big fans of both. Let's go. Maybe if we could get Under Armour to sponsor our habits, like I'd be all about that for real.
Nice.
But the second thing that I was thinking of as you were talking about this is when we look at, and this is why I love the Sacrament of Marriage and why I love doing marriage prep, is because in the sacramental economy and Christ recreating, reestablishing the created order and entering or inviting us into his salvation through the sacraments, he establishes the sacrament of marriage as a way to communicate sanctifying grace. And oddly enough, he does that through a spousal union and spousal love of being husband and wife. And what we don't find, actually, surprisingly enough, and this is shocking, we don't find a sacrament of like paternity and maternity, but we do find a sacrament of spousal love. And so I think when I work with couples and really focusing on that reality, that their sanctification is communicated through being husband and through being wife. And yeah, the family may grow and you may transition into being mother and father, but the realities of being husband and wife are where sanctifying grace is communicated to each other. And that kind of co-working takes place of working towards eternity. So in your work in kind of helping these engaged couples prepare for that and helping newly married couples, because I'm a big fan of follow-up, I think mentorship in the first year of marriage is actually much more important than prep. That's a whole nother podcast episode.
I agree with you.
But how do you help these couples really continue to prioritize their spousal union as engagement continues, or in those first years of marriage where it does get chaotic?
For sure. Yes, I agree with you that I think when the rubber meets the road is where it actually all comes, like we do marriage prep or whatever it is. But when they're 3 months in, they're like, we need support. We need people walking with us, because we took our focus tests and we had all these things come up, and now they're actually coming up because we live in the same room and we sleep in the same bed, and all these things are coming up to be. So that's another branch to the tree that I want to, really dive into and help in the church. But prioritizing one another's hearts. So I created this video series called Navigating Engagement. And one of the videos, this is specifically for engaged women. And one of the videos that I found so important to do in that series, it's called Loving Your Fiance Well. And I think in the process of all of the choices of the family drama that comes along with engagement, and you're trying to plan your wedding, to prioritize the heart of one another. I tell these women, I say, when you're writing your to-do list, at the top of that to-do list, write, love my fiance well, because if he is number 26, you are not actively living what you will be living after your wedding day, which is putting him first, his heart, his mind, his soul, his spirit, his well-being. You have to look at like his well-being is more important than, am I going to choose brie or am I going to choose cheddar? I don't know what kind of cheese you're into, but I like all of the me too. Brie is not really my jam. But like if you learn how to prioritize one another well, above all the wedding planning, above all the guest lists looking at, like, am I looking at his heart or am I looking at her heart? What is going on inside of it? How can I support it well? How can I sacrifice for her? All of those things, if they are at the top of the list, you are actively mirroring the kind of prioritizing of their heart and their mind and their soul and their well-being that you will and need to be doing after the wedding day. So actively looking at that during the engagement period is so important, just to always have that at the top of the to-do list. And before you talk about, you know, the way your mother-in-law got you upset or whatever it is, your future mother-in-law, she said this thing and she's upset about the dress or whatever it is, you sit down and you say, first of all, how are you doing and how can I support you in where we are in our engagement right now? Because it can be so clouded by all of those things that come along with it. But if you really sit down and say, we're going to start every conversation, whatever it is, right? And not to be overkill, not like in a dramatic way, but it really does get lost, especially I find the groom. I feel like, you know, I've talked to a lot of engaged men who are like, yeah, like it's all about this, that, or whatever. And, you know, I'm kind of lost in the shuffle. It's like, no, how do we look at one another and say, we will practice marriage now in the ways that we can. We can't have sex. You might not have joined your bank accounts yet, whatever it is. But by prioritizing one another's heart and soul, like above all else, that is an amazing practice for the actual sacrament when the rubber meets the road and you're in the middle of it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I have a variety of thoughts. One, I think that you should get a grant from some Catholic foundation and collaborate with Father Joseph Anthony on a 30-second marriage pump-up video with training montages. Like illustrate prioritizing your fiance, but like with a sweet backtrack, preferably taken from like the Creed 3 soundtrack. And yeah, also two, cheese. I prefer cheese, which when you open the fridge lets you know if it's presents therein. So big camembert man, if it doesn't knock you over, it does delight you. So whichever comes first.
Cheese guy, cheese guy over here.
Huge stinky cheese guy. Here's to the celibate life. And then third and finally, we're actually out of time. But over the course of this episode, you've mentioned a variety of resources that you're kind of already engaged in or planning to engage in. So you described a video that you and your husband did about arguing well as a couple. You just described this video course specifically for engaged women. You described the possibility of sweet casitas in the backyard. Where are places that people go to find these things? Are they all centrally located? If so, direct us there.
Yes. So my YouTube channel, my husband and I actually talk a lot about marriage and the things that we've learned over time that we wish, you know, within our marriage prep or within our engagement, we would have learned. So we share all kinds of different things. I think having a married couple who's 25 years in is really amazing, but we're only 7 years in. So we kind of just share about what the first 5 years have been on my YouTube channel for engaged couples, for newly married couples, even people who are dating. And then Navigating Engagement is my video series for engaged women. There are a bunch of videos, a bunch of journaling worksheets to actually help a woman prioritize her heart. What is the Lord doing? There's original prayers for all different facets of engagement for her. That's at navigatingengagement.com. If people want to use a code, I made a code Dominicans. That's going to get you a discount code for anyone listening to this podcast. You can use code Dominicans for a discount, but that's been a beautiful thing to help women really. I just like needed a mentor in engagement to say like, how do I do this? Because I got there and I was like, no one really talks about this. What do I actually do? And so I really wanted to help mentor women through that process. And then our Come and See program, I don't know what it's going to be called. We probably have to move outside of California to get enough land for some casitas in the back. But the Lord, I mean, it's really been burning on my heart to bring people into this familial experience because I wish I could have seen it myself. I love it. I love my vocation. I'm so grateful for it. But if I had been able, and I babysat kids, but if I really came in for 2 weeks of a family's life, it would have helped me a lot. It would have enriched my engagement experience a lot. And that's why you got to stay tuned for the Hussem family Come and See experience.
Okay. Upon which you can add a tab to your website which says, you know, in addition to like author, speaker, you can have vocation director, and then you can just have your vocation weekends and just like a deep fake on religious life. People will not see it coming.
Oh my
It'll be
gosh.
awesome.
Totally.
But they
But
will be
do you
coming.
agree that we need things like that?
Yes, absolutely.
You
I'm
guys
right
went
behind
in and you saw the reality day in and day out. And I want to, you know, bring people in to see the reality day in and day out.
I think I see, but I also lament. I have like a world weary soul. I wake up every morning and I say, sweet Christmas, how did it come to be this way? Because ordinarily your, you know, vocation retreat would be your family, but here we are, you know, just kind of in the midst of the breakdown of the family, which is lamentable. But don't stay there, Father Gregory. You're a sad sack.
No.
Listen to what Emily says and get pumped about the future. Sweet. Okay. Well, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. I've profited, and our listeners will profit in turn. Turning to you then, the listener. Oh, sorry. I'm just like a bull in a china shop. I'm like, say thank you and then don't afford the other person the opportunity to say anything else. My bad.
I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. I don't usually get words in edgewise anyway. It's all good.
That's
Okay.
what we are.
To quote-
We're just the standard 4-year-old, 2-year-old
No,
in this
you're
entire
not.
mix.
This has been so enjoyable, and I'm so grateful to just spend time with you guys from all over the world to talk with you about
such
this
joy.
this
Love it.
revolution. We're all in this together.
Yes. And also, we are in this together in another way, too, because Father Joseph Anthony and I have been ordained for about 7 years. So we are vocation. I was about to say vocation mates, but that sounds like we're married. So we are vocation parallel
Buddies.
people in communion.
Vocation buddies.
Vocation.
Let's go.
Okay. Conclusion, here
Let's
we go. So thanks as always, listeners, for listening to Godsplaining. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Like the episode, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review. And you can kind of spread your 5-star reviews so as to encourage us in particular directions. So if you want to hear more episodes about marriage prep, leave multiple 5-star reviews under multiple names. You can just add a 1 or a 2 or a 3, and then just reverse all that in YouTube once you're done. If you'd like to donate to the podcast through Patreon, please follow the link in the description or show notes. And then by following links in those show notes / descriptions, you'll also find merchandise on the one hand, and on the other hand, information about our retreats. So we just posted information on retreats for June, August, and then November. The first one is an all-comers retreat, so everyone 21 years and beyond. Although Buzz Lightyear is no longer safe. So just kidding. So 21 years and further, or more old. Father Gregory, wrap it up. Okay, so check it out. It's going to be great. We hope to see you there. And know of our prayers for you. Please pray for us, and we'll catch you next time on Godsplaining.